Today I'm going to be going over tips and tricks for using Zoom in a lesson sort of setting. Also, maybe some little things about Zoom that you maybe didn't know. I am by no means an expert, but this is things I've discovered along the way, both using Zoom for teaching and for work meetings and things. So right now, just as this is set up, I have a light behind my computer. I'm also using a desktop computer at the moment with a webcam on the top of my monitor, which gives us this nice down angle. Now, if you have a laptop or some sort of mobile device, it's going to be really beneficial to prop it up in some manner, whether it be on some books, or what I've found really helpful is to use a music stand to put either your tablet or your phone or your laptop on, as long as the music stand is strong enough to get it up higher. One, so you get a better visual of your face, and two, so you can set up some sort of workspace beneath you. It's really nice to have some space to work with underneath your camera. So like right now my monitor is here, and down here I have my desk, and I actually have a drawer where my keyboard sits. So I have a complete space to work with. So I could grab my phone or my iPad, or for teaching purposes, I have my students' music sitting out in front of me just below the screen. Any bits and bobs you're working with can be out of your camera, out of frame, and it's within reach, and you don't have to go manipulating your camera. So you don't have to have a desktop with a webcam. It's totally doable with any device, just as long as you can figure out some nice way to prop it up. The next tip that is super, super beneficial is having good lighting. It took me a while to learn this because where my computer sits in my office is in a corner, and there's a window over here, and there's a door behind me. So I'm actually kind of in the darkest part of this office. So what I have is I actually have a craft LED light behind my desktop shining at me. So I've opened up this lighting in front of me. It's super important to have lighting in front of you so that the light is on your face. More lighting above you is going to cast shadows down on your face. Having lighting behind you is going to cast more shadow behind you. So you want to have nice white light or natural light pointing at you. It's super helpful to have it up high and at you as well. It took me a while to get that. Now, if you're using a mobile device close to your face, they actually do make ring lights that you can attach to your cell phone. Like this one here just clips on, and I can click it on, a couple of brightnesses. But the problem with these is that they only work pretty close to your face. It is termed a selfie light. So if you were using your phone close to you, this helps, but it's not going to be a very good substitute for nice natural light or a nice white light. This is how I like to have my Zoom set up during lessons. I have my Zoom window up at the top of my screen. It helps to have a nice wide screen in order to have room for Zoom and anything else you want to be doing. But I have Zoom set up at the top of my screen so I can still see myself and my student. And then at the bottom of the screen, I have my email open, ready to go for lesson notes. But let's take a look at Zoom settings. So when you're in the Zoom window on the desktop especially, you will see a bunch of buttons around. Now up at the top left here, you can see that I'm already recording, and you can control recording settings while in recording, either here, pausing the recording, or stopping the recording, or at the bottom of the screen there's a record button here where I can record to this computer or to the cloud. I'm going to do this to this computer, and I can pause, resume, and stop down here as well. First, let's take a look at video settings. So if you click on just the video camera, you can turn your video off and turn your video back on. but let's go click on the arrow here and go to video settings. So within video settings, you can do a number of great things. So before I had this light, I would use adjust for low light, so I can either manually change my light settings or have Zoom determine it for me. But I would do manual and slide it up a little. Touch up my appearance. I tend to be very blemishy, so to be able to kind of filter out some of those blemishes is really nice. But since I have a light, I don't really need to do that anymore. I can still touch up my appearance, but it's not going to do very much. Enable HD, mostly that's just going to zoom me out a little, see all my secrets. Widescreen, original ratio, all of this is your choice. Mirror my video. Right now I have it set so that I can see my left hand on the screen on the left side, so it doesn't mess up my brain very much. But it usually automatically sets to opposites. So this is my left hand, but it's on the right side of the screen. Can be a little tricky, so I just like to mirror it. Always display participants' names on their video, very handy, especially if you have multiple people in your class and you want to keep track of everybody's name if they've named themselves. Turn off video when joining. Sometimes that can be helpful, but for lessons, not very much. Always show video preview dialog when joining a video, so that gives you the option to preview your video before you actually go into the meeting. That's nice. Fix your hair, make sure you're in frame. Hide non-video participants. That's nice, especially if you're in a really large group, 20, 30, 40 people, and half of them don't have their video on, so that they don't clutter up the screen. Hide all the non-video participants. But I want to see that we have another person in here. It's just me, but spotlight my video when I speak. So again, if there's 20 people in a Zoom meeting, highlight the video that's talking is very handy. What's really going to be helpful for us as teachers is audio settings. So within audio settings, yes, you can control the output of your speakers and the output of your microphone, but super helpful is right here, suppress background noise. Now, for people talking, it's great to suppress background noise. My computer has a loud fan. Sometimes I have a fan going in my room, so to suppress background noise is great. But for music, suppressing background noise means cutting out a lot of your reverb, a lot of your ambient sound, and maybe some technique errors that your student has. So instead of having suppressed background noise as auto, it's really helpful to change that to low, so that maybe it'll cancel out anything super loud that might peak your microphone. You can give people the option to mute everybody, or you can mute everybody when they join, especially in a large group, so that you can control the volume. A lot of times, if a bunch of people are entering a meeting at the same time, all with their microphones on, you'll get crackling and rustling and scuffing. So to have muting microphones upon joining is very handy to kind of control the chaos. While you are teaching, it's very good to have yourself on mute so that Zoom only has to focus on your student's output. And then cutting out all of the extra sound that you're creating helps to catch everything that your student is giving you. And then if you hold down spacebar while you're muted, it will temporarily remove mute so that you can speak, and then do that really quickly. The trick is you do have to make sure that you're within the Zoom program. If you split screen like I do, you have to constantly be clicking, making sure you're in Zoom. Otherwise, you'll be putting a whole bunch of spaces in the email notes. Advanced settings. This is also very helpful. Echo cancellation. I want to make sure it's not aggressive. It might end up canceling out a lot of what your student is playing. Use stereo auto depending on your device. That might be a better option for you. Show in-meeting option to enable original sound from a microphone. Again, it really just depends on what your student is using for a microphone and what you are using for a microphone. Now, one thing that I find super helpful is actually to have 2 devices for one person. So right now I have my phone in this meeting just to be a separate person, but if your student maybe has their computer set up so that you can see their hands, their posture, their feet, it may not be the best for audio. It's actually very helpful to have like a cell phone close to the harp capturing audio. You can have the video turned off on the phone so you're not being distracted, but it being closer to the harp, using the audio from here and then the video from the computer can be super helpful. You do have to do a little bit of experimenting to find out what has to be mic'd, or what has to be muted, what has to not be. So that would be experimentation that you and your students can do together. So helpful buttons around the screen. Obviously we have our mute and our video, which you can mute yourself and unmute yourself at a click. Stop your video, start your video at a click. You can also go in and select more detailed settings in each of them. Down here, security. If you're the host, you want to make sure nobody comes in until you are ready. You can lock the meeting and only people with a passcode can enter the meeting. Enable a waiting room. So I automatically have my waiting room enabled. This allows me to be with one student and have back-to-back lessons at a time, and people can hang out in the waiting room, get themselves ready, and not disturb the lesson that I'm in. And then you can admit them one at a time. For example, if I go over to the participants button here and I click it, it'll pop up with my participants. I can put my other account here into the waiting room. There we are. So it's just me. And this list will grow with the amount of people that are hanging out in your waiting room, and then you can admit people one at a time. So it keeps the flow of students very clean, and they can hang out there as long as they want. They're going to see a little notification that says you are in the waiting room, and the host will admit you when they're ready. Another helpful thing is chatting. So I can have the participants window and the chat window open at the same time. And within chat, I can actually change chat to everyone in the waiting room. So if I have a handful of people hanging out in the waiting room, I can contact them and say, thank you for your patience. I will admit so-and-so momentarily, or this lesson is going a little over. We will start your lesson in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So it's a good way to contact the people who are waiting while also not disturbing your lesson. You can do it very secretive under the radar. The last thing I'm going to talk about is screen sharing, which is very helpful now in the day and age of Zoom lessons. So down here on the button of screen share, if you click on the screen share button, a bunch of options are going to pop up. In the basic options, you can just share your screen, and then your student or whoever's in the Zoom meeting will see everything that's on your screen. You can pull up a whiteboard to draw on. We can do that. It also it will only show the whiteboard on the participant's screen, so you won't see all of my desktop. Any window that you have open, you can screen share individually. The biggest issue I find with this is that, say if I click my PDF reader over here, it's going to show all of the PDF windows. So it's going to show all of the file, all of these options that you see, your participant sees as well. So what I find super handy for that is to actually go to the advanced settings and click portion of the screen. This way you could filter out any excess nonsense that your student and participants don't need to see. And it'll pop up with a box where you can control the area. so that my participant only sees the area that I want them to see. Now, while you're in screen share, other helpful things is annotating. Very helpful. It can be very hard to describe where you are on a page, especially to children who may not know exactly what you're explaining at this time. So here, I have a pencil tool active at the moment, so I could follow along here with my really bad treble clef. Or what's going to be very helpful for teaching purposes is Spotlight. Spotlight is going to be your cursor. So you can either click Spotlight, which is going to light up your cursor so you can follow around the screen, or an arrow so you can point to exactly what you are talking about. Other helpful things within Annotate are stamps, so you can say, tell me what this is. Then I can undo that, and how about this? I can undo that. Or please work on this line, the blue arrow line. So it's very handy to experiment with annotating. Another thing that's going to be great is within annotation, say I have a piece of music up here and I'm right in fingering that I'm talking about. I can save that annotation and send that piece of music, which now has the fingerings on it, to my student, and it breaches that barrier that we used to have in person and just being able to handwrite on someone's music. So next I'm going to talk about Zoom and the Harp itself, specifically how you want to be able to view your students, and maybe yourself if you want to be right on a harp right alongside them. So what I prefer for lesson purposes is to be right next to the harp, completely sideways, good view of the strings, and hands. Hands is super important. And also this way we can have a music stand where it needs to be, but not impeding your sight of everything that's going on. You could also have the camera a little bit further back so you can see posture, shoulders, back. Can't really see feet, but I'm not really going for feet right now on a lever harp. So adjust cameras accordingly to what you want to be looking at on your students, but ideally we want to see the strings and the hands, wherever they're going to be. Now one big note for the audio of your students versus your audio is I find that using headphones like AirPods or cell phone headphones that have a microphone is not ideal. The microphone in headphones peaks very easily and you'll instantly just drop audio for some very valuable seconds. So if you're going to do any sort of alternate audio other than the device that you are using, I would suggest grabbing another device. So I'm on my tablet at the moment filming, and I have my tablet propped up on a music stand. So maybe if they're concerned about volume and sound, you could have a phone on the music stand that actually has the music doing the audio itself. The benefit about that is it's next to the harp but isn't going to be as sensitive as headphones are going to be. What's not ideal is having music stands blocking your video, having the harp facing the video. Really, it's going to be kind of hard to see everything that you need to teach. And oftentimes whenever I'm teaching, I am sitting just to the left of my student. So having the harp this way is going to be very much like you would be in the lesson with your student, just on the string side, being able to catch everything you can see. Now for the pedal harp student,
This is where having multiple devices within the Zoom call can be very, very beneficial. Not necessarily for sound purposes, but for visual purposes. So right now I have my camera very far away, and so this way I can see my students pedaling. So I can really work on their pedal technique as well as their posture, sitting at the harp, and to some extent I can see what their fingers are doing. If we want anything more intricate, like really analyzing fingerings, you could try and have another device, maybe over off to the side here, not necessarily on the music stand, unless it was just to examine a certain part of your music. I find that having video from the music stand perspective is not beneficial. You end up kind of feeling like you're looking at somebody's elbow a lot or up their nose, and you don't really get a good look at the hands. Or you could ask them to just bring the camera closer if you're willing to take up some of that time. Bring the camera closer, let's work on your fingers, or be far away so I can see your feet. And super important, we want to be able to have access to both sides of the harp. Really depending on what you are working on, how difficult the piece is, how difficult the pedaling is. Advice to your student, can you be in a part of your room where you can manipulate the harp, turn it if needed. It's gonna, like for me right now I have a wall right here and it's not going to be very easy to move my camera to the other side of the harp, but I am confident moving my harp around and do have enough space to turn around if needed. Just taking a moment, assuming you have a long enough lesson time to switch sides so that you can get a good view of the right foot pedaling. And maybe getting a better view of the left, what's going on in the left hand. It's always going to be nice to ask the student if they are willing to move their harp around and willing to move things around. Since we can't be there in person and we can't get our eyes right where we're trying to look, or something's not going right there, I want to check on this pedal, or something is a little funny there, I need to check on this hand. In that situation, we'd be able to stand up and walk to the other side or take a closer look. But now we really have to communicate with our students and try and we really have to communicate with the students to ask for angles that we really need to fix problems. Communicating with our students, getting them comfortable with either moving their cameras around or moving their harps around to better simulate a live lesson and getting the corrections that we need versus what we can just see with one camera angle. There are benefits to being on either side of the harp. Ultimately, you'll want to be on the string side of the harp, but my main advice to students would be have enough room around your harp that you can move it, turn it 180 degrees, be able to move your music stand, and really express the importance that the student is set up comfortably with how they would be practicing. A lot of times I'll have students that maybe are on a desktop computer for their video, so they kind of have everything in a funny angle. Their music stand is way sideways, so they have to like turn their body to look at their music in order to have the camera view that they think is right. But really, as long as you are completely sideways, you should have a nice, easy view of your music like you would normally be practicing. Just like in person, I'd be sitting on your side. The camera should not impede how you sit at the harp. It should just be like there's a person sitting there.
I hope you were able to get something out of this and learn a little bit more about Zoom and how you can use it in your lessons.